Right, I think I have your attention, which is fabulous. Just to say, first of all, thank you to everybody in this room, because you're all part of why this commission operated. The work that you do every day is fantastic. There are people that have helped with the report, but there are people in this room that work every single day to help people who are severely disadvantaged and those groups that other parts don't reach. And I am just incredibly grateful to you. It's also, I should say, an amazingly important sector because, you know, there are, 20 million volunteers. Andy, who's here today, Andy Haldane, estimates it's about 10% of our economy, 1 million direct employees, £10 billion worth of public services coming through this sector. So it's a massively important sector, and it's a massively neglected sector, and that's why this is so important. So now I go on to the script. 2 years ago, we brought together 17 people from different backgrounds who all had different voices to give to the commission. And we distilled their wisdom. We've squeezed them dry, if I'm honest, and it's all there in the report. And I think it just shows you how, if you think about the essence of this from the point of view of, so what does government need to do? What does the private sector need to do? What does the civil society need to do? And what do politicians need to do? All of those things are what's in this report. And when I look back on my career, I remember initiatives during Gordon Brown's time, but I remember the Big Society. We all remember the Big Society? David Cameron and Nick Clegg. I remember having a conversation with Nick Clegg saying, Nick, why aren't you behind this? He said, well, it's conservative words, Big Society, not Lib Dem words. So, it was kind of hard to ever get the force. And, of course, there was this claim that, well, this is only just substituting for stuff that should be done by the public sector. But the debate's just gone quiet since then. And this is a massively important sector. And we really need the sector to be heard, its voice to be heard. If you think about what's happening now, the cost of living crisis, the struggles, if we want the economy to recover, we need the private sector, we need the public sector, we need civil society, all working really effectively, which is a theme that Andy Haldane and I have been pushing. If you want to improve the productivity of all of these sectors, and we know that there are lots of things in the report about things that civil society itself can do, and things that funders can do to help, that whole business about longer term funding, unrestricted, all sorts of things like that. Things like giving the FCA a role to help financial advisors, help philanthropists to think about how do I effectively do this. Things about how do we get levelling up to mean something other than who knows what it means at the moment, But, really seriously thinking about people who, example, someone who grows up in Halifax or Hull and is now in Silicon Valley, billionaire, how do they help the neighbourhood that they came from? How do they do that? How do we do match funding and all that stuff? All those ideas are in this report, and I'm not supposed to go through them. There you go. I'm supposed to thank the hundreds of organisations and individuals who've shared their expertise. We've had 26 publications over the life of the Commission, and we've now got the final report. What we found is basically a very striking cross-party support for this. You'll hear from the Minister later. People understand that the sector is important, that it's got its different roles of campaigning or helping communities. Great to see Community Foundation, when I was visiting in Newcastle, represented here today, because I think they have a massive part in this. And the delivery of public services directly. All of those different dimensions need to be balanced. And I think that's hugely important because they can make a huge difference to us. So, I think we have a big consensus about the things we need to do to make civil society work better. It is about liaising better with government. There are lots of things in the report that government can do. Appointing a philanthropy champion is one of our ideas, but also lots of things that may seem a bit nerdy to some of you, but believe me, as a former head of the civil service, I know the power of getting all my perm secs round a table with some business leaders. What sorts of things that exchange can do? why don't we do it with leaders of civil society? You know, it's kind of like, I look at myself and think, you idiot. You just, you know, things I could have done. Anyway, now I'm telling my successors to get on with it and make up for all of my failings. So that's good. So I think there are really important things. And the private sector, you know, we hear so much about purpose. You know, people, it's not just about profit. It's about something broader. Well, you know, let's do it. James Timpson, one of our commissioners, kind of personifies the whole point about, you know, I can do stuff, which really appeals to me as a former head of the Treasury. You know, you can take someone who's just come out of prison, give them a job, which gives them a proper career and means that they don't immediately go back in prison. So instead of paying out lots of money from the Treasury, we actually get them as a tax-paying individual contributing to society. That transformation is kind of where the future lies. And to me, the whole question about how do we manage public spending in the future era, in an era where, you know, taxes are already very high, it is about prevention rather than cure and about all those early stages. I mean, pro bono economics has had the great advantage of working with people like Magic Breakfast and Place to Be, where you're talking about getting in there early. And I should just say a thank you to all the charities in the room for the inspiration they've given me as I've gone around and talked to them all. Right, enough. Sorry, I am supposed to say, if you're joining us and want to tweet along with the event, please use the hashtag #CSU Unleashed. So that's CSU in capitals, then Unleashed. So we've got amazing speakers here who are much better than me, and some old friends and colleagues as well. So that's going to be much better. But first of all, my job is to introduce Deborah Meaden, who is well known to all of you from Dragon's Den. She's a long-time champion of collaboration between the business community and civil society, and of money doing more good in the world. Deborah, over to you. Yeah.
I always have a handheld mic. It comes from my bingo calling days, so I shall get out here. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to talk today. I'd like to echo Sir Gus's words about sitting here pretty much in awe of the people who actually go out there and make a difference. Sometimes when I sit in business, I feel like I can enable a difference, but I can feel a bit frustrated that I don't actually get to feel it or do it, and you do that all day, every day. I also questioned why me, because I kind of stand in front of experts, and usually I stand on a stage as an expert in the room talking to people. I'm talking to all the experts and standing here feeling like I'm not the expert. But what I am going to do is talk about my observations. Through my time at, in business, and that's sort of from Dragon's Den through to more lately the Big Green Money Show podcast that I do, I get to talk to a lot of businesses and a lot of sizes. So this is from tiny, tiny businesses, startup businesses, right through to huge multinationals. So I get a real sense of the conversation and the reality that's going on in life. Because what tends to happen when you sit in a formal environment, you kind of get the party line. But I get a chance to chat to people about what's really going on in their organizations. And often, because I'm often talking about sustainability because of the Big Green Money Show, that tips really quickly into civil society. It's not different. You know, we need to look after people. We need to look after the planet. You know, they're completely intertwined. So I do get a really good sense of what's actually happening. The good news is that I get a sense that business is, boy, are they willing. They want to make a difference. Now, that's for lots of different reasons. That might be because they don't really care, but their customers do. I'm not so keen on those businesses, but that's fine. If they're still going to give the money, that's fine. It might be that they have been born of social impact. They want to really make a difference. And that, particularly on the startup end of businesses, I see that so much more now. You know, every business I invest in, and through Dragon's Den, it's often the tiny businesses. One of the first conversations we had is, what are we doing here? What difference do we want to make? And do you know what now? And this is really encouraging. Money is, of course it's there. You're not business if you don't make a profit. But actually, our social impact or our environmental impact absolutely sits at the top of their list. So that is really good news. So I walk about feeling pretty encouraged. There's a but. Are you sensing a but? I then talk to people within their organizations, and what I get a sense of is, yes, there's a real will and a real desire, but there's no real overall strategy. So you get organizations saying, so who shall we support this year? You must recognize this all of the time, because any fundraisers out there are year after year after year trying to replace that cash. And that happens because businesses want to do something. And what they often do is look to their employees and they say, who should we support this year? And an employee will say, well, I've got, sadly, this happened to one of my family. And they say, well, that's good, that we'll support that organization this year. That's great. And there is definitely a place for that in every organization because it's personal and it makes it really personal. But what there isn't, when I talk to people within the organization, I say, do you know what your aim is? Do you know what you aim to impact, what the difference is that your organization is trying to make? They can't describe that. When I say, which charities do you support, they can tell me what that is. That's the difference between having a strategy and not having a strategy. The problem is with a lack of strategy is that you end up with an extremely disparate picture. So you end up with people in an organization thinking, yeah, we give to charity, but not really engaging with it, not really understanding the difference and not being able to measure the difference that they're going to make. So you end up, that's the people within the organization. You end up with a disparity in charities, a geographical disparity or an ethnic disparity, rural areas. Because charities often choose either because their employees say this is what we want to support, and in the absence of that or in the absence of a strategy, they think, well, I tell you what will appeal to our customer? And that's really common, and that isn't very helpful to this sector, is it? Because we all know we need a map. But business is busy. Business is feeling... I talk about business like a person, and because business actually is just loads of people doing, providing the same service or providing the same product or whatever it is. And I do think of business as a people, and business is feeling battered. There's an awful lot going on in the business world. And without any guidance or help or support or stimulation, what is going to happen when they've got so much to deal with? They might pay lip service, or they might want to do the right thing, but they haven't got the time to really work out how they're going to have their best impact. And again, they then resort to thinking, let's just give some money to the Marine Conservation Society, because they haven't got the time. And so I start by saying, it's fantastic there's a will and there's a desire, but we have got to make it clearer and easier. We've got to join the dots for businesses, both regionally, so that they can have an impact on their local regions if they're smaller businesses, if they're national or even international, wouldn't that be a dream? But if they're national, then there's the regional piece and there is the national map. What is it? Where are the gaps? Where have we got to fill these things in? And also help businesses tell their story. There's another really powerful thing that businesses can do. They're communities in themselves. So they can engage with people into their businesses so that those people will make their impact within the business, but they'll also make their impact when they go out on their everyday lives. They'll be able to tell a story about the impact that they're making. Beyond, yes, we gave some money too. Because that isn't a story, that's a statement. A story becomes a story when you can say, and that is the difference we're going to make. And I'm going to go on to that. There's another thing that business struggles with. Big disparity between the type of organisations, type of charities that smaller business support and bigger businesses. Smaller businesses are often born through either the founder has had an experience or they will think, well, this will resonate with our customers. The bigger organisations will often, and I think I know the report says this because I too have read the report and I know I'm not supposed to divulge it, but the report also says, can't help myself, and you do, you started it. But the larger organisations, they will tend to support the bigger charities, and there's a reason for that. In the environmental sector, we call it green hushing, the fear of talking about the good that you're doing for the fear of somebody pointing out, yes, but you're not doing that, are you? And that thing happened 10 years ago, and therefore I'm not going to support you. And the same thing happens when businesses choose which charities to support. They want to know that it's been through rigorous due diligence. And when you lack time, what you do then tend to do is you pick organisations that you know will have passed that due diligence test or is likely to have passed the due diligence test. That leaves a whole raft of amazing work that's being done that doesn't get funding simply because of size. It would pass the due diligence test, but in lack of time, I'm thinking, you know what, I'm going to go with the safe. I'm going to go with the safe option. And that's where you end up with the disparities, because the choices are being made for the business's reasons. So there's a will, but they're being made for the business's reasons. And they're valid reasons. You do want to make sure that you're working with a good charity. You do want to make sure that you're going to have an impact, and you do want to engage with your customer. I think the really important thing about this report is it talks about joining those dots. It actually talks about building a map that enables businesses to work. Business is really, really good. You give us something to do. I mean, we love a challenge. It's what we do. So, but show us how we can help. And this report talks about how that means not just talking about a map, helping businesses, incentivizing businesses, giving them, looking at the way we tax charitable funding, helping business to bring it forward into this thing that's alive all day, every day, instead of being this thing that you do every now and then. I've just been told I've got 2 minutes. And she was trying to do it ever so discreetly. But can I just tell you, I do, when I get on a topic I really care about, I do tend to ramble. And I did warn, I said, can you, and she very politely went 2 minutes. She didn't actually go like that, which is good. So, I'm a person, we're all people. So I just want to touch as well on a personal level. I don't talk publicly about who I support and what I support. I do it for other reasons than because I want to talk about it. But I, too, want to know that I'm making a difference. I'm no different in my private life than I am in my business life. I want to know I'm making a difference, but I will spend, and I am guilty of putting my money in places that I'm comfortable with putting my money into. So places I understand, places that have meant something to me personally, because I'm not given another reason to put my money elsewhere. I'm not told, yes, but you will actually have a much bigger impact in your local community if you did this and you put your money there. And that, to me, is something that, again, this report talks about. This map of, this regional map, this bigger map that I can look at and think, yeah, okay, I get it. I get the part that I play. And think about it. We network all the time. Wouldn't it be great if we could all stand in a room, a group of businesses standing in a room? I tell you what, this is what our local region needs. I'm going to do this bit. You do that. You do that. You do that. Commit to this, not just this year, not just give them a sum of money this year, but long term, so you can actually see the difference. And something else this report talks about, measure it. See that difference and measure it, because once you can start talking about the actual output, that's when people get really engaged and really excited about things. And we're not very good at that at the moment. Have I got to go now?
Thank you, Deborah. That was amazing. I mean, that was the biggest sell for pro bono economics I've ever heard without mentioning pro bono economics, because what we do is measure impact, and that's helping charities show that they are making a difference and getting them to say, what is it you really want to achieve? Not in memory of Uncle Bob, but actually what are the differences you want to make in society? So I think that's tremendous. And Nicole, the ability to signal to without it being rude is pretty amazing, actually. I never called bingo, so I need to stand here. But I think that what you said there about the private sector is absolutely crucial to this. And this is why, when we talked about doing something on civil society, we knew that we actually had to talk to the private sector and the public sector. And it's them all coming together that can make a difference. The next stage is to move on to our panel, which is going to be led by my colleague in the Lords, Baroness Tanni Grey-Thompson, one of Britain's greatest Paralympians. She's been involved with charities in almost every possible position. Chair of UK Active, trustee of the Commonwealth Sports Foundation, ambassador for UNICEF, patron for many more, chair of Sports Wales, and also, most importantly for us, one of our commissioners, and put her input into all of this. So I'll let Tanni introduce her panel, and after that I'm sure there'll be chance for questions. And Tanni, it's over to you.
Hello, morning. It's always a bit of relief when I actually get up at the ramp, but I managed to run over my headphones as I was doing it, for anyone who didn't see on that side of the room. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today and to be chairing this panel. Could I invite my panel members to come onto the stage? And then as you're doing that, I will introduce you. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. We've got Matt Whittaker, CEO of Pro Bono Economics and Commissioner. Valerie, Baroness Amos, Master of University College Oxford, and a fellow commissioner, Dr. Sarah Hughes, CEO of Mind, and Duro, CEO of 2020 Change. Now, the way it's going to work today, everyone's got about 5 minutes to talk about their impressions of the report. I'm not sure I'm going to be quite so elegant at shutting people up if they talk over. So if you hear someone coughing behind you, that means you kind of need to wind up a little bit. And then it's over to you to be able to ask any questions that you want. We've also got Slido working today because we are live streaming. And Jack and Anuska are running that from the back. So please feel free, once the panel have made their contributions, to put your hand up and ask anything that you would like. But first of all, it's a great pleasure to invite Matt to the podium to make his presentation.
Thank you, Tanni. Good morning, everyone. So, 2 years of work, 26 reports, as Gus said. Actually, more than, I think, about 90 written outputs in total now. Hundreds of conversations up and down the country. Recommendations as we've gone, some of which actually have already landed and are bearing fruit already. 26 recommendations in today's report, a 100-page report, and I've got 5 minutes to summarise all of that. I did complain, but it turns out the person who signed off on the agenda is me. So what are you going to do? So what I am going to do is actually going to dive straight in to give you some sort of overview of what this commission is, where we've landed. And to start with, really a reminder of where we've come from. So we deliberately set the commission up so that it brought in people from the public sector, the private sector, and the social sector. This wasn't about pointy heads telling the sector what to do. Nor was it about the sector going to government with a list of demands. It was genuinely about bringing everybody together. But we are pro bono economics, so we came at everything from an economics perspective. So the framing was really 3 key exam questions, which are economic in their nature. So the first one is valuing civil society. The assertion we made is that civil society is undervalued economically, and we've proved that categorically through this work, and therefore overlooked politically. So the question we've posed for ourselves throughout the process is, how do we better measure and understand the value of civil society? Our second big question focuses around securing sectoral equilibrium. So in economic terms, the general equilibrium approach. How, at a macro level, do we ensure we're getting the balance right between the different sectors? So our assertion there is that civil society is too often seen as a residual, just picking up the pieces, what falls through the cracks between the market and the state. And so the question we've posed for ourselves is, how do we improve the interaction between civil society and government and between civil society and business? And then our third key question is around unleashing potential, the productivity of the sector in economic terms. So if you compare civil society to the private sector where there's a price mechanism, or the public sector where there's the controlling hand of the state, there is no means of matching supply and demand. And that organic nature of the sector is one of its great strengths. But also it means that you do end up with cold spots, with bits where you get unmet need. And so the question we've asked ourselves there is, how do we increase resources going into the sector and the effectiveness with which they're used and distributed? So those three key questions break down into 5 core themes. And we've got a host of recommendations across all of them. Now, clearly, in the time given, I'm not going to get into them in any detail, but I want to give you a quick sense of where we've landed on each of them. So in terms of creating timely, quality, open data about the sector, we are calling for a new approach to the way in which we account for the sector in economic terms. And actually, we've already made some great progress on this. The government has pledged a civil society satellite account. We're working with them to drive what that actually looks like. There is more to do even once we land that. We also want to open up existing government data, both the stuff that exists in surveys but just doesn't have a flag on it to tell you this is a charity. If we can get into that, we can start to do some great analysis. But also the admin data that government owns. The Justice Data Lab is a great example of the power of administrative data to allow us to understand the impact of the interventions that the charity sector, the social sector operates. But it's the only example at the moment. We want to have more. And we want more generally funders and the sector itself to be establishing really a culture of data collection and data sharing, standardization, being open about these things so that we can help each other grow. And if we do all of that, what do we get? We get a properly valued sector with challenges that are correctly diagnosed. And you think about what happened in the pandemic in terms of the timely data we had on what was going on in the private sector, which we just didn't have in this sector. And then successes which are more visible. So we start to understand what good looks like and how we roll that out elsewhere. So then what about our second theme? Strengthening relationships with policymakers. Here, we're calling for increased social sector representation in ministerial groups. There is sector representation, but it's on those things you'd expect the sector to be represented on, those social issues. But actually, we know from the work we've done just how vital civil society is to every aspect of government priorities, including economic growth, including productivity gains. And so we want representation across all of those groups. We also want to increase the touch points between civil servants in particular and the sector, because we identified that as being a particular area that needed strengthening. And so we're talking about training opportunities, secondment, volunteering, but also formal forums, as Gus has already touched on, getting those leaders around the table, getting the permanent secretaries involved, and agreeing priorities for the year. And again, thinking sort of more broadly, thinking about what funders can do, thinking about the sector itself, supporting organisations that want to engage with that political system so they understand how to navigate it. It's not the case that every single charity has to sort of have a PR person who sort of understands this stuff, but can we as a sector help each other out? And if we do that, what do you get? You get a social sector that's encouraged and trusted to bring its insight to bear to shape policy solutions and priorities across government. On the business side, Deborah's touched on this brilliantly. I don't need to go into very much detail here. But what we want is to create those touch points again that Deborah's talked about, which are perhaps lacking at the moment. Inserting the social sector into the discussions that business is having when it's thinking about how it creates social purpose. And so as a priority, we want sector leaders on both sides to come together to try to understand what those opportunities are and to promote them. We want the social sector in particular to play a key role in establishing what the S in ESG looks like. We've made really good progress on the E and in particular on climate change, but only as a result of really hard work, lots of consultation, a sort of coalescence around some key issues. We want to do the same on S, and who better than civil society to help the business community understand what that looks like. And then we want to reintroduce the requirement on businesses to report and record their contributions to the sector. Do all of that, you get those two sectors then working in partnership rather than parallel. And you get a race to the top among firms that want to drive social purpose. The fourth one here, we've got funding, which is a well-worn path. Lots of reports written about this in the past. But actually, I think, as with lots of the others here, there are green shoots that we can build on here. So, yes, the sector is always saying, actually, the funding model doesn't really work for us, and they are right. But we did see during COVID some signs that funders can be flexible, can change the way they operate, and can start to offer funding which is longer term, more patient, based on trust, rather than metrics that are defined by the funder. So we want to learn from those experiences. We want to install a philanthropy champion at the heart of government who works across Whitehall to ask that question in every government conversation about the priorities for the year ahead. What is the role of the philanthropy sector here? How do we connect philanthropy into this? It's something that happens in other countries. Can we do it in the UK? And then building out from that, and this again speaks very much to what Deborah was just saying, establishing local champions, those lightning rods that can draw in investment, that people can coalesce around, can work with in order to push that place-based renewal. Do all of that, what do you get? You get a step change in giving. We're looking for an extra £5 billion coming into the sector every year. But it's amplified by an improvement in the distribution and the effectiveness of that finance. It's not just about more money, it's about the way in which it's used and the way in which it's distributed. And then finally, in terms of the productivity and organisational effectiveness, what do we want? We want, again, on the funding side in particular, but also from government, active support for organisations to focus on increasing their effectiveness. Rather than everything being about service delivery, frontline, 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 actually, in the same way that we would with a good business, can we encourage and support them to invest in being better, in understanding the problem, and finding new ways and taking risks? As part of that, we want to establish a national organisation, a civil society evidence organisation, that can identify best practice and spread it, act as a central hub, if you like, which the sector can access and understand and ask those questions. I know I need some sort of help, but what help do I need? And how can I do this with others? How can I collaborate? And that's not enough. You then need also a diffusion mechanism. So we are calling for a review and then a revitalisation of the local support infrastructure. So we've stopped short of saying, here's our answer, here's the shiny new thing, because shiny new things have a habit of disappearing after a couple of years. So what we actually want is for a review which says, no, this is the way in which you sustainably fund local infrastructure which supports and brings together business, local authority, national government, and the civil society sector. Do all of that, what do you get? A social sector that's supported to innovate, collaborate, learn, and generate maximum impact. And that ultimately is what we're all about here. So those are a sort of slightly economic view of all of this. What's the ultimate vision? What's the prize on offer here? This is taken from the report. In the end, and let's say the end is 2030, end of the decade, a country in which people receive better, faster, more targeted support when they need it, wherever they live, whoever they are, whatever group they're in which the voices of people who find it most difficult to be heard are louder in the rooms where decisions are made, not just in terms of expressing what the problem is, but also developing, devising, and delivering the solution, in which a greater proportion of society's problems are stopped before they start. Gus touched on this, prevention rather than cure, dismantling those structural barriers that create problems rather than just mitigating them when they land. And ultimately, all three sectors pulling together to solve the issues that we're all facing. So that's my 5 minutes. I could have spent 5 minutes just saying thank you to everyone. I do have to say thank you to the PBE team. To my fellow commissioners, absolutely, but to the PBE team who've worked incredibly hard over the last 2 years and beyond, actually. Done fabulous work, really pulled out all the stops, and delivered some bad news for them, which is this ain't the end. This is the end of the beginning. Clearly, we want to take this forward. We've actually got, in the immediate term, we're going to be doing reports specifically around Scotland and Northern Ireland, recognising the differences and the unique challenges that we have in those countries. But we want to take this agenda forward. But we don't want to do that alone. And I know there's lots of champions in this room and beyond who we want to work alongside. We want some of you to take this stuff and run with it on your own. But hopefully the vision we've set out is one worth working hard for. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. Valerie, it's your turn now. Thank you.
Tanni, thank you, and good morning, everyone. Can I make 2 general points before you start counting my 5 minutes?
Yes.
Thank you. I think the first is to say that I'm speaking this morning, I think with a sort of ex-politician's hat on, if you can ever be an ex-politician. As someone who co-founded a charity, but also as a commissioner. And I'm incredibly proud to be associated with the report that you have in front of you, but also with the reports that came before in the last 2 years. It's been an extraordinary journey. I think as commissioners, we've learnt a lot. The staff, I think, have done a tremendous job in terms of what we have been able to offer. So please read the reports that came before it, because there is so much in there. The second thing I want to say by way of introduction is, of course, we all know that we're living through a challenging time. But in challenging times, you can have moments which are transformative. And I think we are on the brink of a potentially transformative moment. If the recommendations in this report are taken up and acted on. So what did I take out of the report? And I can't get away from, I describe myself as an ex-politician, but I still think in kind of bullet points. So a number of bullet points that I took away from the report. First, the importance of voice. We talk about the importance of the voice of people in local communities, listening to those who not only represent them, but are working with them on a day-to-day basis. The process that we have gone through and the recommendations in this report show absolutely clearly why we need to cut across the slogans and actually use what is happening, already happening on the ground, and what people know about their needs and the challenges that they face to inform policy. And it's all there. Secondly, the importance of policy impact, policy development, policy influence, and partnership. The report speaks very, very powerfully about the importance of partnership between our charitable sector and businesses, but also between the sector and government. And Gus, in his introduction, talked about the fact that in the time that he was Cabinet Secretary, he basically missed the trick. That here is a sector that has an extraordinary amount of information and knowledge about what is going on in the countries that make up the United Kingdom that we frankly are not using. Because we have a very, very narrow view of what our charities do. A bit of service delivery here, maybe a bit of advocacy there. The contribution that is being made to our economy and to the well-being of people in our country goes way beyond what most of us recognize. And this report helps to challenge some of that thinking. Thirdly, the importance of strategic funding models. I 100% agree with that, but I also think that we must remember that people themselves make an enormous contribution to the charitable sector in this country. So they themselves have an interest, as well as interests as employees. I mean, Deborah talked about companies where they turn to their employees and ask what they're interested in. We all have an interest in many different kinds of ways, so let's remember that. Fourth, the importance of evidence and data. Our charities have an incredible amount of information about what works, what doesn't work, what we might think about in terms of the future, the kind of impact we can make if we work together. Yet, let's use that data and not reinvent the wheel every time. How long have I got?
I was listening, I wasn't. Keep going.
Okay, a couple more.
2 minutes. I was enjoying what you were saying.
Innovation and looking to the future. The kinds of challenges that we face, not just in our communities and as a country, they're global. They require local action, but they're global challenges, and they need us to work together. So, again, the report one of the great things about this report is that it offers solutions to some of these challenges. It says these are the kinds of things that we can do to make a difference. So being innovative, thinking about the future, where we want to go, being strategic are crucial. Two last things. Cohesion, what I call cohesion, connectivity, and inclusion. And what do I mean by that? We talk about cohesive communities, we talk about inclusive communities, but it's also about government. I was in government for a long time, Gus was in government for a long time, advising all of us. We need to be more joined up. Government still works in silos, but these are solutions that need to be worked on together. So working not just across sectors, it's not just about business and the charity sector working together, it's about government changing the way it works. And finally, and this is always the tricky piece, it's about leadership and courage. This is not going to happen on its own, but it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has to face in the same direction. You can have a couple of people in government who are the champions for this, who really give it the time that it deserves, and they can make a difference. But they have to have the courage to go along with that agenda. And I speak to the sector as well. We sometimes think that we don't have power. We have enormous power. Go out there, be the good advocates that you can be, but crucially, continue to challenge and be controversial. That's what we need if we are really going to take advantage of this moment. Tanni, thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be fired as chair of the panel. I was really enjoying what you were saying, so not counting the clock at all, but a couple of things that stand out, and it's been said before already about, slogans. I mean, the soundbite slogans are kind of irritating, but that voice and courage, and actually, if we're going to do something differently, we need to have a bit of courage in terms of the decisions that we take. And, everyone who's here in this room are here because you care, and it's how we get that voice out to other people beyond this room. Sarah, you're next.
One of these. Can you hear me? Do I have to press something? Oh, okay. All right, I've got a very loud voice and I can't always hear myself. So I must say before I start, I am in day 14 of this job. So if I come across as a bit discombobulated, it's because I am. All right, so let me just lay it out there. Look, I'm really pleased to have been invited to speak with you. Obviously, Mind is the biggest and leading mental health charity in the country, and I'm incredibly proud to lead the organisation. But I also have worked in mental health for 34 years, all of that time in charities, large, small, and everything in between, in communities, in secure environments, all over the spectrum of mental health. I also want to say that this report, which I haven't read, actually, I think I might be the only person in the room at this stage that hasn't read the report, and you, me and you both. I'm sure recognises that it comes on the shoulders of giants, and we do have my sister leaders in the room, Jane from Akivo and Sarah from NCVO over there, and both organisations also been doing a huge amount for civil society for 40, 50 years, and so some of what this report says, I'm sure, has been said many times. So how do we make sure that this is a turning point, tipping point, whatever way you want to talk about it, but how will this report enable progress in terms of the outcomes that you've identified? And I guess that, we also need to recognise that, I'm meant to be talking about the productivity bit. But I want to say first that the charity sector is already incredibly productive. On a level that I'm not entirely sure is always understood. Understood by policymakers, understood by business, and I thank you, Deborah, for being so candid about that. And so, for me, it's about how can we, through this report, add value. and help the civil society, charity sector achieve their ambition. I also want to make the point, and those of you who know me well probably won't be surprised that I'm going to say this. We mustn't also forget that the charity sector is also made up of people who are incredibly professional, experienced, know how to run businesses, have managed incredibly small budgets, achieved a huge amount of impact. So also let's hold that in mind when we're talking about business and charity working together. I have been in situations, and again, Deborah, you have alluded to this, when I've been in a room as chief exec with, 25, 30 years experience, meeting a chief exec from a business, coming to talk to me as if I didn't know what I was talking about. And sometimes that's going to rankle and not be the way that we develop the best relationship. So I think that's really important to point out too. I also come from the mental health arena, and everybody in this room probably will accept that mental health has seen a massive kind of generational progress over the last 10 years. And that is because we as a mental health sector have largely operated in a way that this report describes. We have been collegiate. We have worked together on policy. We have drawn in business. We have drawn in policymakers. And as a result of that, have achieved some of the biggest social change around mental health that is seen across all sectors in civil society, and we have place to be over there too that contributes to that, is fundamental to making that change. But one of the things that I think are really critical, and I'm not sure if it's spoken about in the report, but it's something that I contemplate all the time, which is to achieve some of these big ambitions around, where civil society can take us in terms of social change. There is a piece that we need to do with the public, and we need to help the public understand the role of civil society. When I talk to colleagues and friends, the school mums at the gates about charity, on one hand, they're really pleased that we do what Sue Tibbles calls the relief bit. The bit that is, we'll be there when you need us. They're less happy about what Sue calls the reform bit. And of course, we're in a moment of quite considerable challenge around the reform bit. And so for me, I think we in this room need to think about how we're going to tackle that end of the spectrum to help the public understand the nuance of civil society. And that, I think, is the challenge we haven't quite named nor really found the solution to. And then finally, I think it's important to acknowledge that, I am now the leader of a very big organisation with a huge income, large number of people, a huge reach, huge brand recognition, all of that. However, I am alongside Polly Neat and other chief execs who happen to be female in the main, just saying, that big charity needs to shift. It needs to shift its focus in terms of being the only name in town to being an anchor for the system. So Mind as an organisation is not the be-all and end-all of mental health. And, we often have businesses come to us and saying, can we just give you money? Well, yes, you can. What we do with the money is critical. And so it's my intention to share the love in a way that I think big charity needs to. We can be an anchor. We can use our brand to accelerate, to amplify, to get that social change message across. But our duty is to the system and civil society as a whole. And so that's the bit that I am really keen to think about in my leadership over the coming years. But on that note, I shall pass on.
Thank you. that public understanding of civil society is incredibly important. And Sue, who was mentioned, Sue is over there in the corner. If anyone doesn't know Sue, that's Sue.
Read Sue's work.
Yeah, read Sue's work. Very privileged I worked with Sue in a former life in women in sport. So, and what you're saying about mental health, personal independence payment, the number of applicants have gone through the roof in the last 18 months. The biggest number of claimants has been a 75% increase. It's for 21 to 25-year-olds who are claiming personal independence payment for mental health issues. And if that's not enough of a wake-up call on the back of COVID and everything else, if we don't do something now, if we don't actually all understand there's a tipping point, we're going to be paying for that for a very, very long time to come. Duro, it's your turn now. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Also, thank you for the invitation to speak to you this morning. I'm really excited to be here because our journey to getting the organisation to where we are today, it's been a long one. It's been a lonely one, especially in the first 5 years. And everything that's kind of documented in the report with regards to the relationship between big business or business and civil society and charity organisations is something that I've been screaming about since I entered the sector in 2013. So I started our organisation in 2013. And I came at it from the perspective of an entrepreneur who developed a social mission. So by default, becoming a social entrepreneur and really just thinking about the funding structures and models that organisations have to fight against in order to make things work. And I said I didn't want to do that. I said there has to be a different approach. And what I decided to do was to self-fund our work for the first 5 years on a shoestring budget with the hope of doing such good work that it will catch the attention of big business. Long shot. And it took 5 years for that to happen, but the beautiful thing is, it happened. And the way it happened is so serendipitous that we had an article go out in a leading London newspaper, and the GM of a global retail apparel brand was on his commute home, having finished a regional meeting with their global CEO about how their company wasn't meeting all their values. And the one value that they weren't meeting the most was their value to serve youth. So their global CEO basically told all the regional GMs to go out and find or come up with a proposal of how they were going to do that. On his commute home, picked up the paper, and there's my face with a success story of one of the young people that we placed into employment with a leading property developer at the time as well. And he said, this is it. This is what we've been looking for. The week after, he called me into his office, asked me about, the journey of getting the organisation to where we were, and I told him about the issues that we had with the current funding models and how what we needed was that foot in the door for big business to really kind of support us with long-term sustainable funding. So everything that Deborah Meaden mentioned is exactly what we were promised back in 2018. And that was a catalyst to get us to where we are today. So everything that's written in this report in terms of how business can build stronger relationships with charities and community organizations is what we're living. And what you mentioned about that due diligence piece was so vital because, like I said, I was a one-man band and the structures and the governance pieces weren't fully in place yet. But they were willing to take that risk on us because they felt like this is so key to our company values and we needed to do something. So if we can find more businesses like that that can really live out their values and connect it to charitable organizations, then we can do amazing work. And as a result of that, I'm so pleased that Mary Rose Gunn is in the room today. I didn't know that she was here. I didn't even know that she was a commissioner on this report because from getting that corporate support, the four became our first grant funder. And that's just opened up so many doors for us. And they have this metric that they use where they look for, I think they call it the X factor in a company. And they said that we had that. And that was because we went via the unconventional route of doing things. And I think more and more charities and community organizations need to take on this new approach because it really kind of frees you up in terms of that freedom of mind of thinking. You don't have to constantly be thinking about year-on-year funding. what happened with that corporate, what was a corporate sponsor, but they like to be called corporate partner, because what we are in is a partnership, is that they gave us the opportunity to be able to think outside the box and not have to chase after grant applications. And even when we needed to make slight changes to the way that we report to them, they were willing to do that. So key things from this report, there are 4 things that I wanted to mention. The first one is that partnership piece. And it's so key to be able to formulate strong partnerships between charitable organizations and big business. And that pillar of civil society will start to see that shift happen. The next one is trust. You can't have a relationship or a partnership without the trust element. So you have to trust that these community organizations are going to do what they set out to do. And they have been doing what they set out to do. It's just your approach is now different. And you need to then adapt your way of funding. Because everything that Deborah Meaden said in terms of them sitting in a room and just thinking, oh, what organization can we support this year? They tend to always go to the big organizations. Like I said, we were a one-man band. But the social impact that that business was able to equate to the work that we do is immeasurable. And that's ongoing now. So we signed a 3-year deal with them, and then we moved on to other corporate sponsors. We signed our first one in 2018. Now we've got 30 plus that support us in different ways. And the first thing that we asked for wasn't money. It was that infrastructure support. And that support that made us be able to stand on our own 2 feet. And we spread it over 3 years. And that's what we need. So it's not just the cash injection. Like you rightly said, companies will come to you and say, can we give you some money? Yes, some money is good, but there are other things that community organizations need and charitable organizations need. If we can start to understand that a bit more, we can start to shift it down. Another thing that I'd like to point out is the impact measurement. So that was key for us and was also key for the companies, and it's also key for the companies that support the work that we do as well. They need to be able to report back on the impact that the money that they're giving us and the support that they're giving us is making in the local communities that we're working in. How can we spread that impact? How can we build and share best practice in terms of this is what's working in a local London level? How can we replicate that in Birmingham? How can we replicate that in Manchester? So the point about creating that hub of being able to share best practice, please sign me up. You know, and the final point was on that is actually sharing best practice, because it's so key. I was saying to Sarah over breakfast that for so long I've had my head down just like this, getting the work done. And it's only now that I've got the ability and the capability to actually lift my head up and breathe a little bit and think about, okay, we've done something here. This is different. How can we get others to now start understanding how they can do the same as well? So I'm really excited for what will come of this report, and I'm glad to be involved. You know, so that there's a key metric that stood out to me is the fact that so far 2.4 billion is given to the charitable sector from big business, but that's only 0.06% of their annual turnover. Imagine if we can up that to 10%. Imagine the difference that would make. Wouldn't that be nice? You know, but then let's not just think about the impact in monetary terms as well. Let's think about the support. Let's think about the opportunities. Let's think about the doors that it will open, particularly for new talent to come into the business as well. And also that element of shared practice as well, because there's so much innovation happening within the charity sector that could also be crossed over into business and vice versa. Why are we not having those conversations? Why are we not sitting in that room where we bring business leaders and charity leaders and let's just talk? What are the challenges that you're facing? How can we share that? Thank you.
Thank you. You talked about people taking a risk with you. That kind of links back to the courage. And very quick, I was doing some work with a group of young men who were trying to change their community. And you talk about funding and applying. They applied for a pot of funding, and they were turned down because the grant body said they were going to embezzle money. So I went back to the lads and said, if you were going to embezzle money, what would you spend it on? And they said, this project. Right. So we had a different conversation. Anyway, yeah, we've got, I mean, the kind of the funny funding pots that exist, it's actually, what could we do if we're just a bit more creative? We've got, anyway, we've got a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have any questions in the room? Oh, straight up. Yep, here, and then over there. And if you could say who you are and where you're from, that would be lovely. Thank you.
Hi. Yeah, I'm Ben Sundale. I'm from the Scouts. I'm here kind of standing in for my CEO, Matt Hyde. And he is someone who I really, really admire as a sector leader. And I kind of just wanted to reflect on the point that you made, Matt and Sarah, just about bringing together charities, particularly big charities, sort of around the shared aim of making the point that, we know that we make a big impact in society, right? But I wanted to just reflect on the point that I think charities are working with really scarce resources a lot of the time, and you've got your specific missions. How do we draw together kind of our leaders? How do we draw together our big charities to make sure that we are kind of looking at these key points collectively and showing that civil society can make an impact, and rather than just focusing on very specifically what that charity is set out to do. And the reason I reflect on Matt is because I think that he's extremely good at it, but I've worked in other charities and I know that it's a challenge, and I know that you kind of have very little resources a lot of the time. So I was really interested in that point that both of you made and kind of how we can harness that power better.
So in some ways, it's eye on the prize. So the prize is a better experience for people in their communities and society. And I think that it demands a style of leadership, actually, if I'm completely honest. And I think we can't underestimate the power of leaders who say, we don't care what brand is going to be on the tin of that initiative. And I think it's about stretching capacity to make sure that, one of our central functions is that convening power, is that ability to draw organisations together on a central purpose. And so I think we have to make it our business to offer that to the system, and it becomes one of our central functions. And so when we're thinking about where our resources go, that's where some of our resources go. And I just want to make the point, I think there's a protest outside as we speak, right? So I'm sitting here hearing all of the shouting out there and thinking, I wonder what they're protesting about. But just to make that point, I think it's a leadership style, but I think we need to build it into the baseline of what we do. That if you're a big charity, it's not about what you deliver, it's about what the system delivers. I don't know if you wanted to answer.
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Valerie.
I just wanted to add something really quickly, and it comes from another piece of work that I've been involved in, where we've been looking at international NGOs and the pressures on the CEOs of those organisations. And we did a survey of those CEOs. And I was really struck in that work at the amount of time the CEOs spend on just thinking about the money. So they are unable to make the connections with others in the sector, think about shared challenges, because they spend so much time thinking about where is the money going to come from an organisation that is already very established, that you have responsibilities in terms of what you're delivering on the ground, but also responsibilities to the people who work for you. So we have to find a way of breaking that cycle as well.
I was just going to say two things. One, we bust this in just for a bit of ambience. Yeah, and two, I think the funding point is obviously crucial here, and everything we talk about here in terms of funders recognising that wider role so that you create the capacity and the resource. But I think there's something which goes to the heart of the report really, which is about saying that we all benefit from a stronger civil society, whether that's in private business, the workers that you have, the engagement you have, the local environment you're working in, whether it's government and the stronger democracy, whether it's society itself. And so there is an onus on all of us to be funding those things which help the sector flourish. And so the pipe work, if you like, and so lots of what we focus on in the report when we talk about the national organisation and so on and so forth, is about moving from a position where it's down to serendipity and business leader reading an article on the tube that just happens to be there that day, to structure, where these things, that it's just there, it's just easier to navigate, it's just much more natural and common to have those touch points. And I think the building the capacity of civil society leaders to speak collectively and to collaborate, that's part of the pipe work, and we should be funding that collectively.
Sorry, we're very rapidly running out of time, so I'm going to be sacked for being a really bad chair on timekeeping. Gentleman here had his hand up. And if we do have time for networking. Oh.
Thanks very much. I'll be very quick. The strike outside, it's the strike from NHS workers trying to save the NHS is the protest. Just very, very quickly, obviously civil society exists in a political context and we're moving into a particular stage of the electoral cycle. What difference do panel members think a change of government might make at all to civil society, if anything?
Who wants to go first with that one?
I'm very happy to go first.
Go for it.
Because I think this is partly about the ability, but also, wanting to engage with this sector. And I think that there's a lot of engagement that happens at local level. MPs talk all the time and really understand what is going on in their communities. I think at the level of government and political parties, and I say this as someone who's been in government, I think we are much less good at thinking about the strategic engagement that we require. And I would say to everybody in this room, whatever political colour you are, push your political leaders to actually think about the importance of that strategic engagement, the acquisition of knowledge and information, and the way that that can be integrated into policies going forward.
Do something. Do something. I call myself a parliamentarian, which probably makes me a politician, but anyway, that's it. Really conscious we're sort of eating into our time. Thank you so much to the panel for joining us today. There is networking later, so please continue the conversation. And thank you. Now, Gus, am I handing back to you? Yes. In fact, Gus, thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Tanni, for chairing that so well. And it's great to hear so many different voices picking up on this. And yes, indeed, we are hearing the NHS, the voice of the NHS outside as well, which shows you that you need a voice in these discussions, in these conversations. So my job is to introduce Andrew Law, who has been an amazing supporter of pro bono economics. So we could not have done the work we've done with individual charities and projects, and the Law Family Commission have backed this report, and Andrew's just let us get on with it in a brilliant way, but he's been an amazing supporter, so I'd like to pass on to Andrew to give us his thoughts.
This commission has always been about achieving change, about unleashing civil society. And to do that, we've learnt through this report that we need to do several things. We need better data on the contribution of civil society to our overall economy. We need to secure strategic investment from funders and from the government to further boost the productivity of the sector. We need to unlock and promote more and better philanthropy. And we need to further promote the acceleration of the partnership between business and civil society. And this report lays out how we're going to do all of that. But what I'd like to personally call attention to is a common thread answer to many of those questions. Civil society springs from a sense of belonging that comes from a recognition of the connections that we all have with one another, the ties that bind us together and make society more than the sum of the individual parts. And for me, that sense of belonging is called place, and place matters. I was born and brought up in Manchester, and although I now work in London, my parents and family still live in the north. It's where my football team plays, and it's where I began my own philanthropic journey in education, and now focus a lot of our support there. So when we're thinking about how to encourage philanthropy and how to build a stronger and more resilient civil society, I believe, and the evidence from this commission, I think, bears that out, is that we should start with where we come from. We should start with the local and build to the national. And yesterday, Danny Finkelstein had a brilliant article in the Times coming from a slightly different angle, citing a Harvard study, but basically came to the same conclusions. I had the opportunity earlier on to thank some of you for all of the tremendous work over the last 2 years, and I would just echo that again. All of the commissioners, the technical panel, the essay writers, the idea providers, and so forth, and of course pro bono economics itself. Brilliant commission. And I'm also grateful to all of you today and others in the future who I hope will consider the Commission's conclusions and use them to inform their thinking about furthering the course in all of the conversations they have with policymakers, philanthropists, and so forth. So this is not the end, it's the beginning with a new roadmap. And as Deborah Meaden said earlier, strategy really matters. I often say at work that hope is not a strategy, and we have here our strategy. And I'm delighted that my family charitable foundation is going to be supporting the ongoing efforts of this commission to get enacted some of these recommendations. And with that message, I commend this report to all of you today. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. It's my privilege and joy now to introduce the Minister for Civil Society, which is going to be a slight problem because he's not here yet. Curiously enough, I have spent quite a lot of my life in this situation. One of the most, I suppose, most troubling occasions was when, and this just shows you how old I am, I was John Major's press secretary, and we were in the Queen Elizabeth II Centre, and we had the Russian leader with the big Gorbachev. Mr. Gorbachev was there, and I went out with John Major and I prepared this set of remarks for him to start off, and the world's press were all there. And he looked at me and said, I can't find it. I said, you can't find it? He said, just blither on for 5 minutes and I'll get it all together because I remember it. And I was like, blither on? The world's press, they don't want to hear me. And you don't want to hear me now, you want to hear the minister. So I know what it's like having to fill in for a while. What I thought it might be a good thing to do, because we do have an opportunity since he's not here, and I know there are a number of people who had questions. So it would be good if we can to improvise now and innovate. And if anyone's got any questions about the stuff they've heard about in the report and heard today, if they'd like to now, yes, there's a lady there. Please.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
I've got a few questions from the online viewers.
Good. Yeah.
So I'll try and summarise them all. I think there was some questions about what the opportunities are for kind of getting employees more engaged if you're a local business in supporting local charities. But there's also questions about how businesses can start supporting sort of issues that perhaps receive less support overall, particularly in businesses. So things like refugees, asylum seekers. Are there opportunities to get more employees engaged and for businesses to start supporting a wider range of topics? Another question which might be relevant for you, Gus, is sort of how can things like a philanthropy champion that's proposed by the report be protected from the chopping and changing of political whims? I'll pause there.
Okay. Just very briefly, thank you, Minister. Just when you get all those difficult questions, and you know, but I would say from my experience, I chair Frontier Economics, and we have tried to engage all of our employees in precisely the things that Deborah was talking about. It's not just which charity do you want to support, what outcomes would you like to achieve? And we decided that we'd like to improve the outcomes of people that in disadvantaged groups around our offices in Holborn. And so if you go into Frontier Economics of an evening, actually from 4 to 5 o'clock onwards, you'll see a lot of school kids in there. And my staff are teaching them economics and maths. And, you know, it's a very visible, and they, you know, there are things you can do. And we've also got the local art school. We said to them, just bring in your stuff, you know, come and visit us. And they spent some time with us, and they came up with different artworks which we put around the place, and then some members of Frontier Economics bought them. One of the things I remember is we had right at the front of the office this amazing sculpture, which was in hand signals of Frontier Economics. And it was like, whoa, how clever is that? That's the filling in. Now for the main act. The Minister, I'm very pleased that we have with us Stuart Andrew, who is the Minister for Civil Society as well as the Minister for Equalities. You, I know the charity sector. You have been involved with the British Heart Foundation, several hospices before your election to Parliament. You've got first-hand experience as the head of the fundraising team at Martin House Hospice in Yorkshire. So you know the sector, and we are desperately keen to hear your reactions and how you see the job and how you're getting on with the civil servants as well. That's from me. Minister, over to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed for that kind introduction and for having me here today. I've literally just come from the chamber answering questions, so it's much nicer being in front of I hope, a more friendly audience. It's fantastic also to see so many of you here today representing a huge variety of different sectors and perspectives in recognition of the vital role that civil society plays, not just supporting communities, but really to help them to thrive. I'm pleased to be celebrating the achievements of the Law Family Commission on Civil Society. Your final report concludes an ambitious programme of work seeking to understand the potential of civil society and how to unleash it. Thank you to everyone who has contributed over the course of this commission. The wealth of knowledge generated will be fundamental to pushing forward our understanding of civil society and, importantly, what more is needed to bolster it, especially after such a period of rapid change. Now, I was delighted to take on the responsibility for working with civil society as part of my portfolio last year, although I'm equally excited to be the Minister for the Eurovision Song Contest. But as you've just heard, prior to getting elected to Parliament, my earlier career, when some would say I had a proper job, was in the charitable sector. I worked for 16 years within the charitable sector, working with national charities, but also with local charities and hospices in particular. And I learned a great deal during my time working for those organisations, not least seeing the benefits that donating give not just to the individuals concerned, but certainly to many corporate organisations who saw their employees getting a great deal of benefit from working with our charities. And also many of the community organisations that I've been involved with before and since becoming a Member of Parliament, and seeing the enormous contributions that they make not just to their local community, but to the people that live within them, and the many benefits that bring to those individuals, whether they're volunteering through their mental health and well-being, but also one of my other roles in tackling loneliness. Now, the global pandemic, the war in Ukraine, and the cost of living, of course, have created significant impacts across the country, and civil society organisations are on the front line helping individuals most in need. I'm aware that we are experiencing a challenging economic climate at the moment, and many in the sector are facing increased demand for their services. This is alongside them experiencing higher energy prices themselves. It is important that we acknowledge how challenging these times are, and that is why the government is supporting energy bills for all organisations until March this year. This report, therefore, comes at a crucial time. There is a real opportunity to grasp these challenges facing civil society and work together to ensure charitable organisations can thrive, and the government has a critical and central role to play in this journey. Whilst more time and discussion is needed on the recommendations themselves, I'm keen to briefly touch on some of the main themes of the report here today. Firstly, the report provides a call to action on philanthropy and giving. I know how generous the public are, even in challenging economic environments. I know from my time in the hospices, when we had challenges like the Kosovo crisis, despite that challenge, people were still generous to our organisation. This was also evident in the £260 million that was raised for the Disaster Emergency Committee's Ukraine humanitarian appeal, which the government also contributed to. This clearly demonstrates the generosity of the nation and how we are compelled to try and support those in need in any way that we can. However, there is more to be done, and to bring our combined resources together to maximise our collective funding power. I look forward to continuing the conversation on philanthropy and working with you to consider how we further encourage giving to charitable causes. Second, the Commission's work also highlights the importance of improving data and evidence across the civil society sector. Better data helps the charitable sector to tell a richer story about the impact it has on our communities. It will enable decision makers and funders to better understand the unique value civil society brings to our nation. As noted in this report, there have already been great strides in improving data from the charitable sector. And the government is contributing to this change. For example, we have worked closely with the Charity Commission on their new charity classification and updated annual return. As noted in this report, these changes will help improve the coverage and accessibility of data collected. My department is also working with Pro Bono Economics on a feasibility study for a civil society satellite account, which will bring together data to help us better understand the economic value of the sector. But there is more to be done, and the Commission provides some thought-provoking ideas for how the sector can develop better data infrastructure for the future. Thirdly, this report puts a spotlight on how greater investment in productivity will help civil society maximise its already considerable impact and ensure resources are most effectively used. There are bold recommendations on how the sector, funders, regulators and the government can support this endeavour. I believe that a key part of this for civil society organisations to be able to access the appropriate forms of finances that they need to thrive. Evidence has shown, for example, that social investment has increased the long-term financial sustainability of many organisations operating in the heart of our communities. This has also leveraged private capital to ensure that this money is going even further. And in recent years, the government has provided support to the sector through helping to grow the social investment market, ensuring more community organisations can access appropriate forms of capital through a blended finance approach. We are also delivering change in this space by increasing civil society organisations' delivery of public service contracts, thanks to the Contract Readiness Fund. The intersection of civil society, the private sector, and the public sector can bring long-lasting and meaningful change to productivity, and I look forward to working with many of you on this in the future. Fourthly, the power and importance of collaboration across sectors is a key tenet of this report, and I am keen to see that government plays its role in this, and you can have that personal commitment from me that I will be investing my personal time and resources in this area. Research from the Commission notes that almost all MPs and councillors surveyed have had contact with charities and community groups. MPs from across the political spectrum see the impact charities have in their communities and how vital they are to a flourishing community. And we all know that it's thanks to the many volunteers that work within them that do that tremendous work. So DCMS wants to build on this by connecting civil society with key government priorities, bringing the diversity and expertise of the sector to the discussion. Over the last year, there have been some fantastic examples of civil society and government collaborating. For example, my department worked very closely with the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities on the Homes for Ukraine scheme. This was a great example of government departments and civil society organisations coming together to provide targeted support to those who have been displaced by the war in Ukraine. And more recently, the voluntary and community sector has led the creation of a vision for volunteering, setting out an ambitious set of aims for volunteering in the 10 years post-COVID. I am proud that DCMS is investing $600,000 into the next steps of the vision, and we will continue to work together on the vision's aim to make England a great place to volunteer. We will do more together when we continue to harness knowledge and to share our expertise. And my department and I continue to work to build the bridges between the sector and the government and ensure that civil society representatives have a seat at tables right across Whitehall. In conclusion, I want to thank everyone involved in producing these reports. Your vital work shines a light on the fantastic potential of the civil society sector, suggesting innovative solutions for a more sustainable future. And I certainly look forward to working with you on this, because as I said earlier, my personal experience in the charity sector has shown me the enormous contribution they can make into improving so many people's lives and making all of our communities a better place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. It was great, and yes, I realise that DCMS questions today, so it must have been a busy morning for you. So thank you for that, and thank you for your personal commitment, which I'm sure your private secretary is with you, which I will interpret the report she has to write of it all is, as a former head of the civil service. So the Minister endorsed all the things in the report and just get on with it. Yes, that's fine. Okay, all done. But seriously, we look forward to working with the department and with you as Minister, with the background that you've got and your commitment to the sector, which is genuine, and we can tell that, to really make a difference and to get the voice of the sector out there and to make real changes that can really unleash the potential of civil society, which I think is quite a good slogan. We should use that. Yeah. So it is my job to bring the meeting to a close, just to say thank you to everybody here for your contributions. A lot of people, this report wasn't us transmitting, it was very much us listening and feeding back to all of you what we've learned and distilling all of that. So that's been tremendous for us. Again, thanks to Andrew Law for his support throughout for Pro Bono Economics. All the Pro Bono Economics staff and trustees, you're just amazing. Even when you're making rude signs, you're amazing. And without them, this could not have happened. So it's brilliant. All we need to do is ensure that this is just an event and that we now need to get on and make sure that all of these things are implemented. I'll do my bit harassing the civil service and ministers, don't worry. I'm used to that. So but we can all, I think, help to make sure that this isn't about just a report that's a glossy report. This is about change. That's what really matters to me. I'm not interested in reports or speeches, or I'm interested in changing what really happens out there in the world. So a big thank you. Just to say we have the room here for another hour, so there's plenty of time for networking if any of you want to talk about all the rest of it. And a big thank you for all of us. I'm just kind of contemplating in my life. When I left home this morning, I left my wife as she was about to go out. She volunteers for Citizens Advice Bureau, and Tanni will be pleased to know that she helps people fill in PIPs, which are a really difficult form to fill in. And she's spending the morning doing that. So she's at the front line. I'm at the kind of strategic level. I hope both of us are making an impact. And I'd just like to say thank you to all of you who I know are making an impact. Thank you.